Okay, so when you're talking about something that is personal to you, the best way to explain it to someone else is to explain to them how it affects you. So it doesn't matter what the social definition is, it doesn't matter what a supposed biological definition is, it's how it affects you. And there are many examples where people have overcome physical and mental adversity and achieved. And that's the important thing. If you, even if you know what your diagnosis, we'll use that word because I think that's a simple word. We shan't use words that sort of indicate that it's something that's bad. But diagnosis is not a bad thing. If someone says you have this, then you go, okay, that's fine. When someone said to me at the age of 7 that you have astigmatism or short-sightedness and your eyes are oval as opposed to being round, I didn't go, I've got a problem with that. I immediately knew why I couldn't read. And that's the main problem. So I had a problem with my eyes. My eyes worked. My eyes work perfectly well. So do my ears. Now, what I didn't know at that time, growing up at 7 years old, this is what I was autistic. I was also dyspraxic. I also believe I have ADHD. Now, these are definitions that are in a book, and all these definitions are social definitions. They're not really what I would class as medical models. And medical models, what I mean is that they haven't been neurologically researched, and the evidence for me is still very much out. It's the real. I'm not disputing that they're not real. Autism or neurodiversity is the way that the brain is wired, and if you imagine that the brain is a very complex organ, then it's quite conceivable that it is wired different for some people, and the way you look at human behaviour and how certain people interact, then that's pretty obvious. There are also other things within that sort of rewiring that don't work the same, and that's where I believe and others believe where neurominority comes in. So ADHD, dyspraxia, dyslexia, where the eyes and the ears work perfectly well, but they just don't link to the brain or the certain aspects in the brain. So for me, ADHD is information. I've got information overload, so too much ears and eyes information going in, too much sensory information going in, and then trying to process that information, especially the formal information, the learning information, the developmental stuff, gets hijacked. Now, when you're younger, your brain is able to, in some ways, absorb that information. I think provided you're given a good foundation and basis, I think you're all right. If you find what I would class as your intelligent or your intellectual security, now that's what I'll call it to make it. And I think if you find that, so you'll find that autistics particularly have an interest in one particular subject because that becomes their security blanket, becomes their reference point, becomes their foundation, becomes a point where I know about that. I don't know about other things, but I know about that. That is my security. So that, I kind of drifted off at autism there. So back to ADHD. So ADHD is, there's so much information and you know that you have to get it out. So you speak quickly, you're thinking quickly all the time, and you're trying to process the information and logically put it inside your brain and sort of shelve it. And it's just very difficult. It gets hijacked. So you forget very, very obvious things, names, faces, details, times, and that happens with me all the time. I can give you oodles of examples. You know, when somebody asks me, I'll ask a question, I get an answer, and then immediately I've forgotten. And sometimes it's just a simple matter of a reminder, but even a reminder can be a strange thing. Now, another diagnosis of mine is dyspraxia, which supposedly is the clumsy disorder. I don't like that word, but the clumsy diagnosis. So that means you kind of have a lack of physical and in internal awareness. But it's also highlighted by the fact that your eyes, again, don't sort of marry up. If you imagine that your eyes work together, I suppose a dyspraxic, your eyes might kind of do this kind of thing. So it's very difficult to read. It's very tiring to read, especially for me personally. There are other aspects, but there's a lot of the sensory aspects of it. And obviously autism, because I think autism is the kind of the general big bubble. And within that, you've got lots of different things. So when we're talking about neurodiversity and how it affects an individual, exclude the words that I've used that I shouldn't really use, like disorder, but you kind of slip them in. The disabling aspect for me is that there are times when you just can't function. You can't see, or you can't hear, there's too much overload, there's too much background noise, there's too much background light. I mean, there's just too much light. And there's nothing you can do about that. You can't, if you're a driver, you can't shut your eyes. If you work at a desk, you can take a break. For a classic example, the other day, I had an aura going off. It doesn't normally happen very often, that, but yeah, I'm in a good 2 hours. And after that, then I had a headache. So the headache just kind of, that ended my day, so to speak. Had I been in a job or, some sense of responsibility, that would have been really, really difficult. But that's what these are the kind of things that you have to face and you have to deal with. And it's very difficult and different in terms of energy levels when you've got physical and mental energy to deal with, because you might not have done much physically that day, but that doesn't mean that you're not tired. And you might not have done anything mental that day, but again, it doesn't mean that you're not tired, because, and the two can kind of cross over a little bit as well. Now, there's one other thing that I am going to discuss, but that's going to come on another video. But hey, there you go.